Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Florida City and County Management Association's webinar entitled Strategic Planning, Factory Reboot. My name is Bob Lee, and I have the honor of serving as your host today. Joining as co-host is Dr. Dina Hurst and Mr. Mike Ryko. Dina and Mike are both employed with the John Scott Daly Florida Institute of Government, and they'll be the people who will be assisting attendees most with their technology issues. Sponsors for today's webinar include the Florida City and County Management Association, of course, but also their partners, Florida League of Cities, the Florida Institute of Government, the Center for Florida Local Government Excellence, and corporate sponsors, Florida Government Services Group, Strategic Government Resources, and Granicus. And so we appreciate that partnership and enabling FCCMA to continue to provide these webinars at no cost to attendees. For those who haven't participated in an FCCMA webinar before, we want to encourage you to submit questions to today's presenters. You can do that by looking to the right-hand side of your screen and you'll see chat. By clicking on chat, you'll have an opportunity to submit questions, again, for our presenters, and we always do our very best to try to get those questions answered during today's program. It's meant to be informal, so please submit them throughout the webinar, and we'll take them as they come in as appropriate. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters. On the left-hand side of your screen there, but not necessarily in the video cam, you'll see Sarah Campbell, Town Manager, Town of Orange Park. Chris Flagg. Chris is the A&E Group Operations Principal at Haskell. And Kate Parmalee. Kate is the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Innovation for the City of Port St. Lucie. Sarah, Chris, Kate, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bob.
Before you begin your presentations, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Sarah, would you mind each just briefly introducing yourselves to our attendees with a little bit of your background so they know where you'll be coming from as part of your presentation today?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sarah Campbell. I'm the town manager for the town of Orange Park. I've been with the town just over 12 years, and I've been in the manager role for just 3. Orange Park, if you're not familiar, is basically a suburb of the city of Jacksonville. We're a small town, just under 10,000 population, but we deal with some of the big city issues because Jacksonville is our neighbor. I'm also serving this year as the chairperson of the FCCMA Professional Development Committee. So we've been working all year to bring you these monthly webinars. And when strategic planning came up as a topic, I knew I definitely wanted to invite Chris to participate because his team at Haskell has led us through our visioning process. And I had just come across an ICMA article about the city of Port St. Lucie and wanted to invite Kate to attend as well. So I'm glad they're both able to join us. Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. It's great to be here, and Bob, thank you as well. Appreciate the opportunity. I'm a landscape architect by trade, community planner, urban designer. I've been with Haskell for about 6 years. I've had my own business for a number of years, worked for another large corporation for a number of years. So I've been in Jacksonville for 37 of my 40 plus years of practice. So know the community, know the outliers as well, and the surrounding communities. And it's always a pleasure to be part of their vision in vision planning. So glad to be here to talk a little bit about it today. So thank you.
I'm Kate Parmalee. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Innovation at the City of Port St. Lucie. I've been with Port St. Lucie for about 4 years, but it's kind of hard to believe I'm actually entering my 20th year of local government service or service to the community. Started out in Martin County, Florida, many years ago as a planner and worked for Martin County, worked for the City of Gainesville, and in philanthropy for a few years, and then again in Martin County, and now in Port St. Lucie. So really enjoyed just learning about the various facets. And in strategic planning, I feel like I get to continue to grow and learn in all of these areas as we look at how to best serve the needs of the city overall.
Sarah, before you begin, I just wanted to reference your comment about your relationship with Jacksonville. What I understood was that they were your biggest suburb. I didn't realize you were.
Good point. I should reframe my speaking on that.
Exactly.
That's a great opportunity.
Thank you.
I'm going to use that at some point, Bob. Thank you for that.
All right. Well, moving into our discussion on strategic planning, I want to ask Chris and Kate to tell us about the process that they designed to conduct strategic planning on the projects they've worked on. And Chris, I'll turn it over to you first.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And you know, you look at the time allotted, and obviously, I'd probably like to have a platform of about 6 hours, but in the time allotted, we'll be brief and a quick overview. And obviously, there was a very severe pivot point during our process. But you know, looking at Orange Park, as Sarah mentioned, it's a wonderful little community, and I emphasize the word little. It's a community that really wanted that human scale and wanted, if there's development, future development plan, it was imperative for us to stay within a scale to the town and ensure that that small town feel was something that was constantly in our thinking. So we formulated a diverse team. This slide illustrates the diversity of our team. We had community outreach people. Haskell, my company, was the lead planning firm. We had Vroom Planning, who also dealt with pedestrian scale walk audits and biking and really pedestrian walkability processes throughout the planning process as well. So the next slide really broken down to we had 5 major deliverables. And we took these deliverables, certainly we all understand the process, but we took these deliverables and our mantra was essentially divided into 3 categories. One, it's inspiration. Where do you find inspiration? And you do that in our initial deliverable is really embedding within the community and understanding and assessing the current capabilities and possibilities of that community. You look at their budget standing. You look at their capital improvement plans, their current financial status when you can. So that was our deliverable 2. Deliverable 3 is what we like to call our exploration phase, and that was how do we continue to embed and understand through surveys, community input, public town meetings, outreach. How do we understand the pulse of the community? How do we really know exactly what they want when we're talking about scaled progress and development? And that was huge. So community engagement was a key entity and component of the success of this process. Deliverable 4 was essentially we begin to synthesize and refine our strategic visioning direction into a SWOT analysis. We look at our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We all know about that. And then you summarize lastly in our overall report, our plan that we want to ensure outlines an implementable opportunity for the town. So we set off on a fairly aggressive schedule. This schedule illustrates the October-November times was actually 2019, and we looked to proceed into the early 2020, looking at around a 6 or 7 month process to ensure that to the left you see our 5 deliverables, and we wanted to allot the proper time to ensure that the timing and outreach was current. But you also notice deliverable 3 was the main spine of our information gathering. That's our community outreach, and that was really the spine throughout the process. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that schedule was afflicted with certainly the issue at hand. Next slide. Early we wanted to embed within the community. We wanted to understand their voice. So we attended community events as a team. We had walk audits where we had a pedestrian scaled look at the town, its issues, its transportation issues, its connectivity issues, everything that we began to gather in that that exploratory phase that we talked about earlier. All of this was to inform the team on really the town's personality. And that was paramount for us to continue our successful planning effort.
Kate, why don't you tell us about your process?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Sarah and Chris. And I think, we found this kind of really interesting how we both really started with community engagement, but that was resident engagement. That was the heart of our planning process as well. So we definitely have that in common. And I think, we heard some research back in last year when the pandemic hit that in the last recession, the organizations that really embraced strategic planning were kind of in a good position to navigate the change and be able to kind of take advantage of opportunities. So we really felt committed to following our strategic plan process all the way through. We had to really pivot with our outreach because that was so critical. So I'm going to share a little bit about that in a moment. But first, to begin, our process really served us well, we felt like, throughout the pandemic and for the past year. So next slide, please. I think. So just to give you just a bit of history about Port St. Lucie and why strategic planning has been so important to us. We are a city that is, we just celebrated our 60th anniversary. Actually, this year we're celebrating it this month. And so our city just was formed back in 1961. So it's been it hasn't been around for that long. And we only had 330 residents in 1970. Right now, we are over 200,000 residents. We are the 7th largest city in the state of Florida, the 3rd largest in terms of landmass. So we are this growing city that has had to manage growth in a rapid way, manage a lot of policy issues. We were built without a lot of the infrastructure that or city amenities because of how we were developed, how we grew as we were a community developed by a developer that did not provide sidewalks or infrastructure or downtown. So we've had to retrofit and strategically plan as we go. So strategic planning has kept our city on track. And really what we've seen is really that we're becoming a city on the rise as a result of our mayor and council are very progressive, working really hard to keep the city on pace and become and fulfill its potential. We have a great city manager and our city manager, Russ Blackburn, that I know many in FCCMA are familiar with, a great leader. And we have been now, received some notoriety from U.S. News and World Report recently as one of the safest cities in the nation. We are the safest large city in the state of Florida. That's really been by a very this police department that is driven by stratified policing and strategic planning, high functioning department. We are the 5th city in the nation that people are moving to, the 5th place in the nation to retire at. So we are knowing that we are continuing to experience massive growth even in the midst of a pandemic. And we see that we'll continue to be facing challenges and opportunities as we grow. And at the heart of it really is our resident-driven process. What we've really done is focused on listening to residents first to see our needs, and we've utilized the National Community Survey to do that. We did an initial survey back in 2009, and this is our 4th year of doing the annually. The past 4 years we've conducted the survey, and that survey has given us a lot of great information about, and we can ask residents on an annual basis about emerging issues that we've used the reporting process to inform our strategic planning process, and actually have received the Voice of the People Award from the National Research Center and FCCMA as cities that both respond to the needs of residents in the strategic planning process.
We've lost our presentation here.
No problem. So our strategic planning process really uses 4 steps. So the slide will come up in a moment, and we think this is helpful to other communities as we found it along the way. We worked with Dr. David Barth with Barth and Associates to develop this 4-step process, and it includes first beginning with analyzing, which is the National Community Survey and our Citizen Summit, which I'll show you more about in a few minutes. Then we design solutions as our 2nd step, and that's through the strategic planning process and our strategic planning workshop with our council. Then we implement, and we focus relentlessly on that implementation through project charters and project teams and making sure we deliver on what we put in the strategic plan, and then we evaluate on a quarterly basis through our progress reports to council. And this is our system at work, just to give everyone a visual of how we do this. We begin every year in the winter, where we at our winter retreat, we give a budget forecast to our council, and we talk about emerging issues. That's when they get in-depth reports on different departments and any issue they want to talk about in depth. Then we move into our citizen survey phase, which wraps up between January and March. We conduct another kind of survey through our Citizen Summit, which this year was March 4th and 6th. And then we just held our strategic planning session just this week, actually Monday and Tuesday, where we gave them all the data from our Citizen Survey and our Citizen Summit events and let them identify what changes they wish to make to the strategic plan, which we implement in April. We adopt the plan, we incorporate it into the budget and CIP, and then we keep evaluating, and the process continues. So that's our process. And we found that that process worked well, but we did have to adapt how we reached residents and engage them through the pandemic. And some of the ways that we did that were through, again, the National Community Survey continued. Our participation actually grew through this year, which surprised us. We thought that we would see a drop-off, and that we actually received, in addition to our random sample scientifically valid survey, we received over 1,200 voluntary responses through our online survey, which so we felt like our residents continued because we built up every year showing them what we do with their feedback. We see that our residents continue to remain engaged. Next slide, please. We also ask residents too, what are the top 3 priorities you want the county to focus on, a city to focus on this year? This can be used for a county or a city. It allows you to really see what's emerging. And so we ask this question every year. It's always interesting to see how it changes. And then we translate all of that into updates to our goals. Every year we have 7 goals, and our mission and vision statement has remained the same the past few years, but we implement the changes are made at the strategic initiative level and project level every year based on resident feedback.
So we reached a point in both of the processes that you were working on where things took a screeching halt. So tell us then what the impact of the pandemic was on your process. And Kate, I'll have you start that off.
Absolutely. So just a look back, we had reinvented our Citizen Summit. We used to have just a public meeting in the evening for a couple of hours, which, our city, we call ourselves a city for all ages. The average age is 42. So we found that we didn't have a representation of all ages and sectors of our community at a 2-hour meeting, that not everybody wanted to participate in the strategic plan. So we reinvented our Citizen Summit process a few years ago to make it a drop-in event. We had stations, we had activities for kids, you could bring the whole family. It was on a convenient time. We held it on a Tuesday night the first year, and then on a Saturday the past few years. And we have, as of on February 29th, 2020, right before the pandemic began, we had over 600 people in a room, wall to wall, with food and giveaways and just lots of, just a celebratory atmosphere. We were saying it's, 2020 was our Vision 2020 was, of course, our theme, as a lot of people had, and, our future's so bright, we have to wear shades. We were giving away sunglasses, and we were all just in this really peak mood because things were really going well in the city. We had driving simulations for our traffic safety initiative. It was just, it was a great day. And then just two weeks later, the pandemic hit. So we had to kind of actually pause in our strategic planning process that year. Didn't complete our workshop until that summer, until we had a sense of what was happening with the pandemic and the impact, and updated our strategic plan. This year, while we were able to complete all of our engagement activities prior to the pandemic in 2020, this year we had to completely reinvent, and we wanted to continue the forward momentum we received every year, more and more people coming to the Citizen Summit. So this year we actually changed and provided more opportunities to participate, hoping we could recapture some of the ground we had maybe lost through the past year. So we held a virtual Citizen Summit. We held a pop-up Citizen Summit event at our neighborhood park. We held another pop-up Citizen Summit at a household hazardous waste, where we actually interviewed people in the line while they were waiting to give away drop off their waste. And then we had another pop-up event at our Mid-Florida Event Center on a different strategic goal. So we actually have a video coming up next, I think, in the next slide, that will just share with you a little bit more about how we had to reboot our community engagement process so we could begin our strategic planning process this year. think we're having some audio issues.
Oh yeah, Sarah, I'm not sure that it shares the audio this way. So if I can go ahead and I can share it through GoToTraining from my end.
Sounds good.
So just so everyone knows, this will pop up on your screen. It should autoplay. If it does not, please feel free to go ahead and press the play button. And the audio will come through your computer speaker. So if you're dialed in to the webinar on your phone, please make sure your computer speakers are turned on.
I don't believe the audio is working. Are you hearing the audio? Or you are hearing the audio? I guess I must not be. Thank you. Thanks for letting me share a bit about. Absolutely.
All right, Chris, tell us about how the pandemic impacted the process in Orange Park.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. Kate, wonderful process, and obviously it's got to be community driven. I wanted to illustrate the schedule again because we talked earlier about our deliverable 3, and really our main emphasis was the community outreach and the stakeholder input, and that central spine that was imperative for us to receive that level of input and connectivity with the community, if you will, in order to be successful. We did not have the luxury to stop. You could see the yellow green line around the end of February, early March. It was interesting as we were going through the blue squares indicate public workshops and public meetings and charrettes and things of that sort. And we began to hear after the new year, we began to hear rumblings of, this flu-like thing that's circling the globe, and we began to have little sidebar conversations. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to just continue and see what happens. Well, in early March, we know what happened, and it absolutely ground us to a halt. But we were under state grant issue money for the process. We had a schedule and a deadline. If that deadline wasn't met, our money would run out and would be taken back off the table. So we still had our end of May, early June deadline that was in the crosshairs. So we had to figure out a way to get it done. Next slide, Sarah. So what we essentially did, we gathered as a team and with Sarah and her staff and created a communication strategy and COVID-19 response plan. It's we felt like a small city undergoing a catastrophe or catastrophe. What do? You have to create a strategic plan to handle it. So I wanted to just go through a few of those components. If you can go to the next slide, Sarah. So part of that obviously was identifying the strategy. What are we going to do because of the pandemic? We're unable to stop. So how do we address our original methods of reaching out to the community and execution really of the plan? How do we do that? What are the alternative communication avenues through our methodologies, our new methodologies? What can we define that we can finish this community outreach? How can we keep the focus really as top priority of the community when there's health concerns and there's issues related to just being protected? So our objective, we were going to promote certainly online surveys and anything that we could complete virtually to ensure that our objectives of input and feedback were reached. So we targeted a number of surveys that we wanted to send out to get completed. We targeted our audience, certainly the residents, business owners, leadership of all types. Next slide. And we also, began to say, how do we reach the community? How do we educate the community on yet a new method of communication? What will our presentation formats be? I mean, it was crazy. It was crazy times because we didn't have really that time to sit back and think about or put it in neutral and wait a few months. We didn't have that time. So we had to absolutely pivot quickly. We had to ensure that the virtual ways of communicating were intact. Our tracking mechanisms and data and attendance we needed to have. We had to have outreach goals. Our engagement, we had to educate our viewers of all diverse demographics on how to stay engaged. How do you reach a community so diverse to ensure that that every voice is heard? How do we create workshops? And then how do we again present this information back to the community in a way that they understand it, they can still react to it, and still be a part of its solution? Local business, the outreach was constantly focused on community business. Their target marketing. We had topic sessions that were self-guided in a way to where we could focus on a particular topic of interest, whether it's transportation, whether it's green space, whether it's community scale, and then we needed that virtual feedback. And every time we could elicit a survey response, we needed to do that. So our workshops were webinars, there were Zoom meetings, there were virtual calls, and all all methods. And it was really an exploration of how do we now leverage technology. All of this was new to us. We didn't do Teams calls or Zooms calls or things of that sort. We didn't set up community hearings and outreach virtually. We've never done that. So we had to learn on the fly as well. And Sarah, you might mention something here about your staff, and your staff was so wonderful to pivot with us.
Yeah, I think it switched a little bit from being a predominantly consultant-driven process to having to rely on our staff to get the word out more. You can see some of the graphics there that we use to really hone in on why we were switching. We wanted this to promote this as a virtual process, and we wanted to reach different demographics. So we had different ads or marketing for seniors or for children or for the Black community. We wanted everyone to see themselves reflected in those images, but then it was incumbent on the staff to push those out multiple times a day. We had a hard deadline to get the surveys done, and we wanted to continue to push it and push it and push it to reach as many people as we could.
And you guys did an excellent job as well. It was really a consolidated team effort. to ensure that that communication line was kept. The next slide indicates a little bit of our communication methodology, if you will. On the left, it's really the format and the frequency. As I mentioned earlier, we had to be creative, we had to stay creative, but we had to keep everyone engaged and focused, because I'm telling you, that was a time where interest on planning and vision was very difficult to stay focused upon. There were too many other things happening. So we wanted to make sure, and as Sarah mentioned, her staff did a wonderful job in helping guiding us on where can we put inserts in monthly bills. You know, how often do social media ads need to be posted? How do we have, you know, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook leveraged to the best of our ability? And that was a daily opportunity as well. We used the telephone where we could, because not everybody had internet. So we had to make sure that we got the diversity and inclusiveness so desirable in a holistic solution for the town. And then the announcements were at town meetings and through virtual webinars and town meetings as well through Sarah and her staff. I tell you, when you look at the before, and Kate, you can relate to this as well, you know, it was really wonderful. You know, we had dogs and families and people, and we were all laughing and food, and it was, boy, the good old days, huh? Never thought we'd look back on those days as the good old days, but you know, that's what it was. We'd presented little workshops in town halls. We'd have interactive charrettes and input, and that's how we are as planners. That's our life. That's our language. How do we deviate from that? How do we ensure that we stay connected? Well, you leverage technology as best you can, and then all of a sudden the audience looks different. It's like today, we're looking at the screen. You know, it's funny when you look at the faces and you see the mood change of people. I don't see any people with pets and you know, animals and things of that sort, but yet we stayed engaged and we had to leverage what we had. And we were very successful, I thought, in a sense that in this really time of crisis, we were still able to be engaged. The community was wonderfully focused. This was incredibly important to them to ensure that it got the right attention. So our Zoom virtual events were advertised. See a little advertisement in the lower right as to when and where, and we tried to remain as optimistic as we can about as we could about really the benefits of what this community vision will ultimately entail.
So let's move to the wrap up. What were the results of the process that you used, and then what were the lessons learned? And we'll start with Kate, if you'll tell us about the final results of your process.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, and you know, Chris hit it on the head where, you know, just we had to kind of really move in terms of how we engage residents. Our whole process and our thinking had to change. You know, something that we were concerned about is that residents, because we weren't able to interact in our normal way, you know, our strategic planning summit, our citizen summit allowed us, how we designed it is people could speak directly to project managers working on the strategic plan. So a lot of our communication was one-to-one communication. Residents would come up, and as you saw in the video, how we had to pivot was we created a strategic plan trail so they could read about it. And so it made us have to think, how do I even explain the strategic plan on a sign instead of in a 5-minute conversation? So we had to really push ourselves and try to boil down what we were trying to communicate. And as a result, really though, because we really pushed ourselves and thought, how do we need to go to different areas of the city? We need to have this virtual format. We did videos, we communicated about the strategic plan in a whole new way, but we were allowed to see, we were able to see that residents stayed engaged and satisfaction remained steady in our citizen survey this year. It was shocked actually to see that resident satisfaction. It was fairly steady, and even went up in certain areas. Our outreach improved and expanded because we pushed ourselves out of our box a bit more. And the council was able to continue to use citizen feedback as valuable sources of information. It was enough feedback to really be similar to what we received last year and even more. We had about 600 people come to our Citizen Summit events last year. Between all of our pop-up events, we had almost 1,000 residents participate this year. We had, which so nearly doubled, and more participating online. And we had new residents that even weren't had never participated before. Our virtual summit reached new people that would never have come to a public meeting. I think we're finding that in every public engagement we're offering online, is that residents are getting engaged that have never come to a public meeting. So you're getting a whole new perspective. We had one resident email us after our virtual summit saying, I was about ready to move away. I thought, the city isn't changing fast enough for me. I'm going to move to South Florida. But now that I see all these things are happening, I want to be a part of the change, and signed up for our Keep Our Cincy Beautiful committee. It was just really a great success story. By just seeing what's to come, it got people engaged and wanting to be a part of that change. The council, again, heard that feedback on Monday and Tuesday of this week, and is incorporating that into their strategic plan. And our projects then continue to remain tied to resident needs. But we just had to think differently about how to reboot our planning process. And I think that's one of the challenges and opportunities of the past years. We had to really rethink to get to the ultimate outcome in our strategic plan process. How do we rework, as Chris explained as well.
There's some great parallels, Kate, and it's fun to see, because I think if nothing else, and everyone's heard this and said it, what the pandemic had done was it leapt us ahead probably by a decade of how to leverage technology. And you're absolutely right. Our outreach was far greater virtually, because people had the opportunity to still stay connected, where maybe transportation was an issue, and just getting to a meeting in a timely fashion was an issue. But we were able to create our vision. We were able to stay within our schedule. I mentioned, we were under the constraints of state grant money to be utilized within a certain time frame, and in our conversations with the state agency throughout our milestone applications and milestone deliveries, the people within at Tallahassee said that we were the only planning firm that essentially kept their schedule. Others had to bail. Others couldn't really pivot in time, and we were really happy in the fact, and I really attribute that to Sarah's staff, Sarah's guidance and leadership, and really her staff. And we had to consolidate as a total team and make sure it worked. So yes, we completed our 20 days of public meetings, we in person and virtually. We had our 5 deliverable reports, as I mentioned earlier. We had our online surveys, but most of all, we ensured that it was a mission-driven, resident-focused vision plan. And we created short, mid, and long-term goals. We rebranded. We looked at a prioritized implementation plan. All of that because the community stayed focused and stayed involved, and that was just huge. That was just huge. And part of that is we wanted to illustrate. We illustrated their development hotspots. The plan on the left is the town of Orange Park, and it said there's a critical transportation intersection that sort of serves as crosshairs of the town. There's lakefront opportunities. There's development opportunities along the main corridors. There's park and connectivity opportunities. So we illustrated those throughout. We listened, we heard the community speak, we responded illustratively to their desires. The sketches to the right are ones that are just preliminary and schematic, and then the final plan to the left, along with images that could be, were presented as a final plan and annotated with really the community-driven solutions. And we were very gratified that we were able to come in under the wire. And I'm telling you, we were all panting like we just ran a marathon at the end of this sequence, because it was a tough pivot, and it was a lot of new lessons learned, if you will. So ours was, an interesting plight, because this project, not only was it unique geographically and through scale and some of the things that Sarah mentioned earlier, the town is a wonderful little town, and one that deserves to have its spirit retained. You know, but we got off to a shaky start. One of the councilmen for the town passed away just as we were finalizing our contract to get started. Obviously, that puts a halt on things. We wanted to be extremely respectful, knowing that we were under a deadline-driven schedule, but that was our issue. That was no problem. We were going to handle it. It didn't matter. But that also led to an historical first for the town as well, because we had the appointment of our first Black councilman, Councilman Henley, who was an amazing contributor and voice for the diversity of the community as well. And it really turned out a huge positive. And oh, by the way, there was a global pandemic that sort of interfered with us as well. But it gave us the opportunity to understand what virtual public meetings were all about. We had have to pivot and created that vision plan so everyone could follow the criteria of what do we do next, and then how to do it next. And through the group effort, we felt that we got to the point we needed to get to in a way that was satisfactory and visionary for the town as well.
And I think, you know, some of what we learned was really using challenges as opportunities to innovate. As Chris mentioned and Sarah mentioned, you know, utilizing technology, we did leap forward as an organization. We had never conducted virtual public meetings before, and it's actually one of the most preferred formats, because we found a way to do this in a really can get a lot of feedback really efficiently. We've kind of figured it out as a team, and it was a great way to really engage our entire team. You know, we conducted our virtual summit in 2 hours. We had all of our project managers available via Zoom. You know, we were an hour into our presentation on the goals, and we're hearing, you know, we have 80 questions in the queue, and the project managers want to get to them right away. So they answered most of the questions before we even got to question and answer directly. So we were able to get all of this great interaction happening really efficiently with our team in 2 hours, when it would have normally taken us 4 to 6 hours probably to reach everybody. So it definitely was an opportunity to innovate, and we couldn't do it without our communications team. And I really recommend, if you're not currently working with your communications department on strategic planning, that is a partnership that will elevate your ability to provide outreach, to think about how we speak a lot in strategic plan speak and objectives and all of it. And I think really working with a communications team that helps translate that to the residents is just really key, because then residents know better how they fit into this process. So I really encourage that. And delivering on resident-driven strategic priorities, we try to communicate every year when we announce all of our citizen opportunities for strategic planning, how their input has shaped what the city has done in the past year. And we try to always tie back into our strategic plan what is in the strategic plan and where did the input from the residents weigh in, and how did it shape it. So residents really feel that, you know, their time has been well used, and that they really can shape the future of the city. We do recommend to go where the stakeholders are. That's something we did more this year. Instead of having one citizen summit, we had it in multiple areas of the city. As I mentioned, we're the 3rd largest city in terms of landmass, so it allowed us to reach more people. But we also had an aha moment. Our business navigator mentioned, you know, we had an outreach at our city center, which is where we want to encourage economic development. But we only had we didn't have a big turnout at that event. You know, it was about our economic development goals. It was where we want to invest, but not a lot of people came out to it. He said, you know, if we really want to engage feedback on businesses and economic development, we should go to a chamber breakfast instead. And it was a great suggestion. So next year, we're going to try to go where the stakeholders are on that issue, instead of kind of create an event and make them come, you know. So we're going to find ways to do that. And then the last kind of lesson learned for us was simplify, simplify, simplify. Through our citizen summit process or survey, we have so much data now. I can tell you what a senior in this area of the city is most important to them, and what the highest issue is. I mean, we're very data rich now, but we find that with all the information coming at everyone these days. I mean, I heard a report recently that we've received 40 billion more emails in the past year. I think because of our work patterns have changed, everyone's at information overload. So, we were getting all of this, wonderful pages and pages of citizen feedback. And our vice mayor had a great idea. She said, can I have our assistant in her office kind of just count the number of times something was mentioned goal by goal? So we had that done, and that 2-page summary of how many times an issue was mentioned in our strategic planning workshop was used more than our pages of comprehensive data. And so I think sometimes what we're finding is, with all that we have to go through, finding tools then to let your policymakers see the data in a way they can kind of see and scan and see what's most important will help them as we really weed through a lot of really complex issues. It helps them to have some kind of almost navigators in that way. So those would be some of the lessons learned we learned this year. So we're going to keep trying to keep things shorter and shorter.
Great, thank you both. And I think we've reached the point in your presentations where we can turn it over to the audience for some questions. I do want to say 2 things, Chris. One, thank you for the compliment, but it was just my sheer white knuckle determination not to give up the grant money that got us through that. And 2, Chris did not mention that all of the renderings and the artwork from that project are from him. He's an incredible artist, watercolor artist, and does some really beautiful things. And we had the privilege of seeing some of his artwork in our final product. So that was a great honor to us as well. But
well, thank you, Sarah.
Turn it over to the floor for questions.
We do have a question that's come in, Sarah. And by the way, you guys did an excellent job. It was like you worked together, not just on this presentation, but on the strategic planning process as a whole. So really appreciate those different perspectives and lessons learned, and really even what you seem to be keeping as a result of post-pandemic in terms of tools that work very well for you. So thank you very much for that. We have a question that's come in, and this was directed at you, Chris. You had mentioned grant funding for the strategic planning process. Could you please provide some further details on that for those who may be interested in that?
And I don't mean to pivot. One thing I did learn: remain nimble and flexible, Sarah. I might have you. I might have you give the details on that, because we were certainly under the constraints of it, but you handled all the details related to the town needs. So
the town of Orange Park applied for a Florida Department of Economic Opportunity technical assistance grant for strategic planning and visioning. We were awarded that grant. It was a $40,000 grant, and I think we had to provide an equal match. We ended up exceeding that, a $40,000 requirement on our part, but it turned out to be beneficial in that, the residents felt much more comfortable bringing on a really, really professional firm to lead us through this process, because they knew that the state was making contributions to the grant as part of it. And it was a great relationship with DEO as well. I think we quarterly reports, and then each time we had a deliverable due, they reviewed those deliverables, and once the deliverable was approved, we moved on to the next deliverable. But when the final deliverable was turned in, everything was a thumbs up from the state, and we got full reimbursement. So it was a good process for us.
Sarah, do you remember what some of the criteria were in terms of eligibility for a local government who wants to apply for such a grant? They can follow up with the department.
Yeah, I can look. It seemed like it was very wide open. It was really more about the project that we designed, and the things that they needed to see included in the project in order to qualify. So some of the research and the metrics, the metrics were really important to the state. The impact that it would have on our comprehensive plan or our land development regulations were also critical for them.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. Do either of you want to elaborate on anything that you covered that you sort of abbreviated because of the time constraints with this webinar? But upon reflection, is there any particular aspect of what you covered that you'd like to spend a little more time on?
Hey, Sarah, if I could jump in just for a second, because I did think about this as well, Bob, and that's a great question. One of the things I wanted to talk about was when we looked at really community outreach and establishing interactive conversation, two-way conversation, we divided the town into districts, and we had district representatives who were just neighbors and interested community members. We had 11 districts, so that each sector of the town was represented, and it was almost like a neighborhood mayor, if you will, and that person would be representative of their distinct area. And we had early meetings with those district representatives to help us understand, as I mentioned earlier, the personality of the community. And really, it was extremely diverse. And we had everything reported to us from a feral cat problem to resiliency issues, to want more lake access, to traffic congestion. So, that was the scale of items that each one of those district representatives had the opportunity to report to us. It's almost impossible to get out and cover every square inch. So we thought that was one way to at least increase our ability to have as diverse and as holistic a coverage of the entire community as we could.
Thanks, Chris. We have another question that's come in, and I'll just go ahead and read it. In the event someone's just on the phone and they don't see it on a computer screen. The question is as follows: how did the pandemic affect its support from elected officials for strategic planning and ultimately their continued support to implement the goals and projects that came out of the planning?
Kate, you want to take that one first and then I'll chime in?
Sure, I can take that. It was interesting. Right before our mayor and city council are incredibly supportive of strategic planning, which is really a gift to the staff. It's having their support, and that is how they unite. They really use their strategic planning process to team build and to identify what they are on the same page as. They really use it well. But one of the things that the mayor had said to us before the pandemic is, we were in a special moment of time where things were we were working well as a team and everything, and it literally was almost like kind of a premonition that this was not going to last forever, that would be a change. So I think what I saw come out now is that we realized that that maybe some of what you assume is always going to be available, or the resources, et cetera, things can change. So I think I see a renewed urgency on the council to get things done, to see things through. We've really reorganized our strategic plan, that it's very project based. So we have our goals and our initiatives, but they're focused on projects that have an end date and have milestones, and they want to see more and more accomplished given the the volatility sometimes in our world right now. So it's great to, I think that if anything, it just continues to get them, stay them focused. We didn't have we used to have every year 20 new projects added to the strategic plan. We used to have like 200 projects we were tracking. And every year, as they move more and use this process effectively, we've systemized everything where, our plan includes a multimodal plan. It includes to implement our 10-year Parks and Recreation master plan. So there's plans within our plan that now every year we already know what the next project is. So we found as we continue to use strategic planning, it helps us kind of almost stabilizes where we're going as an organization too. So I think that's, we're using that process kind of can help us. But I think the pandemic just increased the urgency to accomplish things.
For Orange Park, the annual strategic planning that we had been doing was very much just an annual process. This was the first time that we'd gotten a lot of things done and out of the way and had an opportunity to take a long look and prepare a 20-year vision for our community. And so initially there was frustration that some of the neighborhood engagement that we had planned and counted on was not going to take place. And I think that disappeared fairly quickly once they saw the online level of engagement, how many new people were coming out and participating in this virtual format. And then once it wrapped up, it's almost like the pandemic didn't happen. They are so excited about the results. A 20-year plan with short, medium, and long-term goals. They want to know why 6 months in I haven't finished implementing yet. So they're very eager. They're very eager for us to continue to press forward on all of the goals that we identified. So it's all good. It's all good.
Okay, thank you all for that. You know, someone who gets to teach as one of my master's courses, strategic planning, I can tell you that the research reaffirms, Kate, what you talked about in terms of your elected officials being receptive, being anxious to be part of the process. And that's one of the important starters, at least from what I've read and my own personal experience, is that you really should have some elected officials buying in the whole idea of going through the process. Because if you have them, if you have a body that is not really interested in this, that could end up with the results that are actually worse than not going through the process. So anything you can do to, with little successes, and of course in your cases, they have trust in the people who are actually administering this for them, and that trust is very important. But for those communities out there who have never tried strategic planning and are thinking about doing it, that's one of the steps I would suggest, is that they make sure they have a meeting of the minds, so to speak, with their elected officials, so they can get behind it, because they're a very, very important component of the success of such a process. Any final comments before we wrap up and conclude today's session?
Thanks everybody for participating today.
Absolutely. Bob, from my side, I can't agree with you more. If you don't have political will, you'll go nowhere. So that's a great observation, and appreciate that. But I also want to say thank you once again to Sarah. You saw how she pivoted halfway through when there was almost technical difficulty. That's why I said it. I'm glad it's her and not me. She did a grand job once again of keeping us focused and online. And Kate, thank you as well. It was a pleasure to be a part of this. And Bob, thank you for the invitation. And Sarah, thank you.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank
Aaron,
you all.
Chris. Yeah. I just wanted to share, we just want to just thank you for the opportunity to participate. And I learned a lot today as well. I think it's great that we're always sharing ideas. If you want to see more about what we're doing at cityofpsl.com/strategic plan, we've got a dashboard and our strategic plan samples, if that's helpful to you. So, thank you.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks for your past participation too with FCCMA and the webinars. Let's conclude by just also acknowledging the committee that Sarah chairs, the Professional Development Committee for FCCMA. They actually develop these topics, identify speakers. They're the people behind the scenes that actually organize these. But I also want to give another shout out to Dr. Dina Hurst and Mike Breiko. Those are the people you're not hearing except when you do a countdown at the beginning of the session. But they're really the ones that help prepare this, work with the presenters, and also the PowerPoint presentation to make sure it's complete. Any audio issues that we may need to make sure are covered, they're responsible for that, and many other things. So appreciate very much Mike and Dina's help. And then finally, just to acknowledge the Florida City and County Managers Association Board of Directors. They are routinely interested and have been for many, many years in providing these webinars for their membership. So we appreciate their continued interest in doing that. And finally, just thank everyone who participated. We had a good turnout today. Appreciate the questions that were submitted. And with that, thank you all again. We're now adjourned.
Thank you all. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.